Hello, everybody. It's 12 o'clock, so we're going to get the show on the road. Today, if you're reading the screen, the presentation is on the IT landscape VCU, complexity and organizational culture. The presenters today on my left, Brian Canaday. You guys probably know who he is. He's been a fixture here since I've been here. You may not have known, but Brian was a web developer many years ago. How many years ago, Brian?
20.
20 years ago. They just invented the World Wide Web.
They did.
But he came to VCU and he's been here ever since, and he now has a new position as the Chief Information Technology and Business Solutions for the School of Dentistry. And on my right here is Katie Shedden. I think that you were fairly new at VCU.
I am. I've been here for 8 months.
8 months is a long time for VCU, I think, already. So great job. She received her undergraduate and graduate degree at James Madison University and ended up here anyway, so that's great. Her current role focuses primarily on classroom support and faculty development. She's currently working on her MED in adult learning and at the VCU School of Education, which is awesome. So a round of applause for them, and then we'll start.
Yeah, so first of all, good afternoon. We appreciate you guys having us here. Thanks, Curtis, for the intro. That's nice. We appreciate you at least inviting us here and having given us an opportunity to talk. What we wanted to do, though, is kind of set the stage a little bit. This is going to be a very different, I think, seminar session than you're used to. We're not going to be focused on this like crazy, innovative, creative technology space. So we're not into this Docker containerization, Kubernetes, or cybersecurity, or networking. So we're not going to focus on any of that. So we're excited that you're giving us an opportunity to really talk about the IT landscape, basically the culture, the organizational culture, and what it's like to work here. And the things you're going to hear us talk about, I don't want anyone to take offense to. We're not saying it's a right or wrong. We're not saying the culture is not good. I see Shane laughing. What we're saying is we have a very unique culture, and it's very complex. And I think that, I've been here for 20 years, and it's kind of just evolved. And so for me, I didn't really think of it as complex until we started onboarding new people at the School of Pharmacy. As Curtis mentioned, I was at School of Pharmacy. I'm not there anymore, but a part of our focus here was to really talk about some of the anecdotal and the stories that we had at pharmacy. Now I'm able to take those into lessons learned at dentistry. So again, setting the stage here, not an IT conversation, more of a culture conversation. So here's what kind of transpired at the School of Pharmacy. I had a job, a position that was open. We started talking about it at the team level, like, what do we need? What job requirements? Let's think about that. Job description. What are our needs right now at School of Pharmacy? So we started thinking about that at the team level. We set up our normal hiring process, maybe very different than some of the hiring processes that go on now. We were able to incorporate basically a half-day interview process for all IT positions. And so we did the lunch. As a team, we were able to take our candidates out. We were able to meet with a lot of people, not just technical people. There were faculty and assistant deans involved in that process. So we thought that was pretty cool. So we started thinking about, okay, what's next? So we have the onboarding process. Let's define that. Let's talk about the training that's going to be needed to get this person up to speed. And then, we thought about, like, let's really set the expectations. So we thought, hey, we got a good plan. And then we hired Kate. And what happened?
So I came into the School of Pharmacy space. I was working part-time in the School of Business for a few months beforehand, and I was asked to take over the classroom space, more so than the instructional design space at first. So I was asked to learn, the way that we do things at the School of Pharmacy, get to know our students, our faculty, our staff, and kind of figure out what the team culture was within our pharmacy IT shop, we call PharTech, as well as kind of the culture of the school and what's important to everyone. So to kind of get a pulse on what processes we needed, so video conferencing being one of the main ones for our program in particular. And then as I started to kind of get a month or two into my role, figure out how can I maybe improve these processes by making them my own and look for ways where I'm sitting in the classroom already, what are faculty and students needing that maybe we're missing. So that kind of brought up some questions.
So opportunities, right? Here's what happens, the daily, probably life of Brian and Katie. Every day, we're meeting, we're debriefing, or every week we debrief, every month we debrief, and then we do the quarter kind of like, hey, we're doing evaluation, let's talk about this. So every day I got a new question, like, who is MSS? Why am I dealing with the vendor, the vendor versus MSS? Why are the PCs imaged differently? Why can I turn to my FARTech teammate and they can configure a PC in one conference room, but then I have to go and put a ticket in through TS to configure another computer? She said the Zoom settings work really well in this particular conference room space managed by FARTech. However, we go down to another room and I can't change the settings. Or if I do, they get reset every night and I have to go back and change them again. So she was asking these kind of questions. The restaurant panels are different. And see, our footprint is not just the Smith Building School of Pharmacy where it's located. We have McGuire Hall Annex. We have biotech space up on Lee Street. We have classes in Sanger, Baruch, GBJ. So a lot of these classes, our classroom spaces are not managed by FARTech. They're managed by someone else. And so, every day we're having these discussions. We're doing orientation for our new students. It is a professional program, so we call them, P1 students. So we do an orientation, we start explaining things, even like email, like the Google Apps environment and the different domains. And here's your email address. It's at vcu.edu, but that's really not your address. That's an alias. Here's your real email address. And so, we got into these conversations. So Katie was like, what? Can you explain this to me? So we'd be on the whiteboard. We're going over this. And then classroom response, the audience response system. Why are we using something different than VCU is using? We're using Poll Everywhere. That works in our spaces, but maybe the plugins are then not installed when she goes to support a faculty member in another space. So all these things are coming up. They're coming up. And then here's what I realized. Okay, big fail. I completely, I think, misunderstood onboarding somebody into this environment, what it would be like for them. I've been here for 20 years and it made perfect sense to me why it was so chaotic, but it made no sense to her, like, why is it this way? And I'm like, that's an excellent question. I think it's kind of just evolved and it's turned into a very complex environment. So we're fine with that. So we said, let's reset this. So just by a show of hands, how many of you all came in the last 5 years into VCU from an external entity, like another state agency or another university? And I'd be curious if anyone, was it challenging? Was it different? I mean, does anyone want to comment on that? Was it like, wow, VCU is so different? Or was it like, this is normal everywhere?
I would say it was way more organized. Where I came from.
Great.
Where I came from, the structure was essentially non-existent.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm not saying this isn't organized. I'm just saying it's complex. So So we started talking about that. Like, how could I do a better job of onboarding people? How can we do a better job of that? So first we started thinking about the VCU IT landscape, what that means. And this is all contextual. It means something very different to me at the School of Pharmacy on that campus versus maybe one of my counterparts over here in TS or at School of Business or Engineering. So we started thinking about what is the landscape? How could I do a better job of highlighting that to the folks on our team? Then we started thinking about the why, the mission, the vision, strategy. Where does that actually come from? What Mior's group gets or Dan's group gets may be very different than what I get. We have different objectives that are being either put on us or whatever. They're coming from somewhere. And then we talk about like the how. So when we do have a problem or a challenge or an opportunity, however you want to phrase that, like a tactical example of how do you get that resolved? Like how do you make progress so that you can actually get a solution in your customer's hands, right? And then we talk about is this the perfect model? Are we there? Is the model that we have, is it perfect? I don't know. I don't have an answer, and I wasn't even trying to figure it out. It was really just, let's have a conversation in the Q&A about what the model is and what it could look like. So has anybody seen that phrase before? Everybody's heard of it? Gestalt? Yeah, so you're familiar with that, then I can help you explain it. So what do you see? Anyone? Somebody remote or somebody here? What do you see? Anybody see a collection of parts, two wheels? You would hope no one said, I see handlebars, two wheels. You see a bike, right? And that's kind of how we process information, this big picture view of things. So when you look at that, you already know to start processing, you put it together, it's kind of that whole part, whole theory, right? You got these little parts, you assemble a bike in parts, but the idea is that you have a solution. You created a bike, we can use it, and it meets someone's business objective. That's key. Have you seen this one? What do you see, somebody?
An old woman.
What do you see? An old woman? Anyone else see anything different?
Young woman.
You see the young woman.
And you go back and forth.
You can definitely go back and forth. So this is your context. It's what you see. It's how you do things. You look for patterns. And so we were thinking about this. I think it's kind of the same way. Like we onboard Katie and we ask her to do a job and we expect her to do a job and do it well. But we haven't given her this big vision view, like you're making a bike. All we told her to do is go do this one thing, but we didn't give her this high-level overview of what it's like to be here and to have success. So that's really our focus here is how do we all have success collectively and individually? And if we do, what does that even look like? I mean, do we need to do a better job of laying out this VCU IT landscape to everyone involved in IT? So this is what I see. If you ask me what the VCU IT landscape is, this is what I see. This is what I've always seen because I've always worked on the VCU Health Campus. How many of you all see that when somebody asks you about VCU IT landscape, you have this Venn diagram at your disposal and you kind of see it this way? Raise your hands if this is what you normally see. A few of you guys, right? Not everyone sees it that way, right? Now, I got some folks in the room, they may see it this way. Raise your hands if you even know what that is. Yeah, these, right? Oh,
I am an employee.
You are an employee of that, right? That is. So Boomer is actually one of my teammates. And so we look at this. So when you ask Boomer what he sees VCU dental care because he's working and handling tickets in that space every day. But if we put a ticket in to, let's say, TS, they may not know anything about VCU dental care. Go ahead.
Sorry, prime example, this event. I could not register for this event because I'm classified as an affiliate.
That's right. So you're not one of us.
Yes.
Exactly. So you see it's a very different environment. It looks different for me. It looks different for Boomer. It looks different for you all. And so I was wondering if we put this together and really like preach this or shared this, I think it may make it easier for us to kind of do business, right? And solve problems. So we were looking at it that way. So then I thought, well, what else is the landscape? Like, where do directives come from? Where do these objectives come from? We know there's compliance and there's audit and there's SACS accreditation. We have our own accrediting bodies on VCU Health Campus. Each school has to also, meet some requirements of other accredited bodies. So we focus on it from that perspective. So this would be the TS org chart, right? You have Alex at the top, and I get that, and you have all these directors in between. So you have a lot of conversation back and forth through that chain of command. For me, not that I ignore it, but it's not as paramount or as important to me. My chain of command comes directly. I have two bosses. You see they're very different roles. And so every day when I meet with them, I know what I need to do, and it doesn't come from Alex. It's actually coming from these folks. Now, I hope that it's in line with what TS has been asked to do. Of course, I want it to be. Sometimes it's more restrictive, sometimes it's less restrictive. So this is kind of our flow here. Boomer, again, is one of my teammates. He's seeing this environment on a daily basis. He may not really focus on this environment. Some of us are focusing on that environment. But if Boomer knows more about this and this, should he be able to do a better job at where he is, right, when he gets his tickets every day? I would say absolutely. And I don't know if he's been exposed to this or not. I'm new at dentistry. We're still kind of going through our own evaluation of each other. So, this is something that I've been working with Katie on at pharmacy. So that's kind of why you're here. Here's another one. How many think, when you think about the VCU IT landscape, if that pops up in your mind, does that ever pop up into your mind? Yeah, some of y'all folks, absolutely. If you're on our campus, I say our campus, the other campus, if you're at SomTech, you're at FarTech, you're at dentistry or nursing or health professions or Massey or Office of Research, we have a much tighter connection with VCU Health. So that's certainly on my mind as part of the landscape. But it may not be on everyone's minds. So thinking about that, we bring Katie in from the outside, and what was your context?
So I was right here on the map. So I worked for JMU's IT help desk. So I was very much in an environment where I worked for technology services at JMU, but there wasn't really an alternative. There was no SomTech, there was no FARTech. There were maybe point people for some departments on campus, but that was an individual and not a team. So I usually funnel tickets through the help desk, so I'm kind of like the frontline person who then directs tickets to other teams on campus like network engineering or PC services. So I very much saw it from a centralized view. We really didn't have the decentralization that VCU has. I think in part because of the structure of our campus. So for example, we don't have VCU Health. We don't have an equivalent at JMU. We also don't have a large medical programs that have these different requirements. From my perspective, I may be missing out a couple examples, but they certainly weren't prevalent like they are at VCU. So really, at VCU, the equivalence to JMU's model would be technology services, kind of just serving the Monroe Park campus, which is really a more typical undergraduate higher education experience. So for me, coming in and with this perspective of JMU, thinking about things like the email domains and people being affiliated with VCU, working within VCU, but not really a part of VCU in some ways, was very confusing. Even thinking about the different groups, like, okay, well, how do I, who within classroom support do I need to get in contact with? If it's this room in the Smith building or the one right next to it. That's something that I'd never had to deal with before. So when I kind of understand that it was really my frame, it's not that a centralized model to me is any better. I don't think that it necessarily is. I just think that the environment then kind of necessitated this decentralization and my understanding that it was decentralized. So kind of moving into the why, or where we're getting all of our directives from. So the mission, vision, and strategy. So we thought this was kind of an interesting point. I was looking at Dr. Rao's most recent address to the VCU community, and I saw some of these themes kind of pop out, especially when we're talking about student-centric higher education, as there are these kind of things where declining enrollments are becoming a theme across higher education across the US. So I found this article, it's Top 10 IT Issues of 2020. EDUCAUSE came out with an article, it came across my inbox, and I thought it was an interesting view. This is only part of the image that would fit on the screen. I mean, you can probably Google it and find it for yourself. But I thought this kind of illustrated how our mission is informed by the goals of our schools, our departments, and the university as a whole. So starting over here with simplify, thinking about this as managing and maintaining our current systems, looking for areas where we can automate, ways that we can better manage our current systems, and looking for ways to streamline. So how can we eliminate redundancy of our resource, overusing certain resources. Second, sustain. So as Brian kind of mentioned earlier, we have to comply with certain auditing and accreditation standards. So we don't operate in a vacuum where we aren't, we have to comply with certain standards. And finally, innovate, which is that remaining competitive, thinking about ways how we can kind of shift and think about, what's the student of today, what's the modern student looking like, and how do we attract that student? And then how does that affect us as IT organizations? So we kind of had an example to highlight that. So the Make It Real campaign for VCU, there's kind of a similar one at JMU, like be the change. So the essential message being, if you're going to give students a valuable higher education experience, it's because they're being able to get these on-the-job skills and training and really going out in the community and feeling like they have the knowledge that they need to then be informed to go on to a career. So I was taking a look at the REAL initiative at VCU, which kind of is bringing together all these things that all these different schools at VCU are doing, like the School of Pharmacy goes out on rotations or has Missions of Mercy. So those sorts of initiatives that are then kind of categorized as students getting these real experiences and putting them all in one central location so we can take a look at what VCU offers to students. So I noticed among one of these goals for the REAL initiative was to implement new IT solutions. So using the Student Opportunity Center platform's database to connect students with opportunities and attract their engagement on a central level. So that's where that kind of comes to. This is a university initiative. This is something that VCU as a whole is really taking a look at from a technology services perspective as a growing emerging trend that we need to focus on for our whole student body. So this starts to look a little different when we go down to the department level. So Brian will kind of explain from his perspective how he's worked with CRMs on dentistry and pharmacy side.
So here's, I think, and when I was explaining this to Katie, the whole centralized, decentralized, I think to me, this is where you get a lot of benefit, right? When I hear CRM or student opportunities or portfolio, I know VCU may be looking at a system at a higher level. When we start fleshing that out, it's where it gets really nuanced. We look at all the different needs at our school level, and we think about it this way because we've already been doing CRM and portfolios really for like 2 decades on our campus. And a lot of these are done internally, where we're building our own systems because that initiative maybe hasn't hit the TS level or hasn't hit the university level yet. Like right now, there's a huge initiative to look at a CRM slate. And then our question is, we hear about that, we look at it and say, well, how can that be implemented on our campus and will it meet our needs? So when I see this here, we think of the full life cycle of a student. Again, it's much smaller level. It's decentralized. I think student from, you almost want to call it, I don't want to say cradle to grave would be terrible in this case, but it's really from application process all the way to alumni, right? That's our real focus. So we would meet at the school level to think about CAS. CAS is something that's influenced on our campus. So how many of y'all, when you hear CAS, which one of those resonates? Who knows about the top CAS? College Application Service. Who thinks of CAS that way? Okay, you might. Who thinks of it Central Authentication Service? Right, so again, this is just an example of when I hear CAS, or like Cosman's actually on here, he's the full stack developer at Pharmacy. Well, he's written a lot of the hooks from our CAS. That's the application service that like School of Dentistry, School of Pharmacy, School of Medicine actually uses to apply. So it's very different than me applying for grad school at VCU. This is a completely different process. So we have to grab that data. We take that data, we massage it, filter it, we pass it on to what we call the applicant, application review committee. And then from there, maybe we have some certain algorithms or certain applications in place that allow them to score and rank our students. And it kind of just goes all the way around, right? From a scheduling to the interview process, to an offer, to an acceptance, to the matriculation, all the way to the student experiences and portfolio. Well, again, this is a huge initiative for Dr. Rao in his latest speech. And we're like, man, we've been doing this for 2 decades. The question is, can we do it differently now that VCU is going to adopt Slate? So I love the decentralized, centralized model because it allows us to tap into maybe a resource that VCU-TS may want to pay for that could benefit me. And we'll talk a little bit about the life cycle of these applications or processes anyway. So that's kind of one instance. And again, this is my focus. You look at my business objective, is not to select the technology. It's to get a student in the door and that they graduate and they become, talking about CRM, now they're an alumni and you hope that they're actually giving back and they're part of our school and part of VCU organization. That's really our focus.
So, and from my perspective at the School of Pharmacy, I came in with, as I described in the beginning, kind of okay, what is the most important thing here? In my role in classroom support, a lot of what I do is facilitating the video conferencing connections between our campuses. So in the 3rd year of our pharmacy curriculum, students have the choice to remain at Richmond or to go to one of our satellite locations in Charlottesville or in Northern Virginia. So if they do decide to do that, we then have asynchronously connected courses that we use hardware codecs to connect all of our classrooms at all of our sites too. So they're able to get as similar as possible an experience to students in Richmond. So when we were upgrading our Northern Virginia campus this past fall, in early December actually, we started thinking about, okay, these codecs are becoming end of life. And technology services does not support codecs. So moving forward, what's the best option for supporting our distance campuses, because they're going to be around for several years at least. So we need to think about longevity of our systems and knowing that we no longer have an IT position at our Inova campus, so there's very limited support. So if we do need to go up there for support or put in a service ticket with our vendor, that can take a while, and our classes can't be down that long. So this then also came into my development of a process. So when I'm developing this process, I'm thinking, okay, this is something that has to be similar enough to a hardware codec that people aren't going to really notice that it's different. It has to be easy enough that not only can I do it, but others at the distance campuses can do it that are in more of an administrative role. And this is not their only task. They're not responsible for solely classroom technology. And it has to be somewhat automated. We can't operate in a way where everything is set up for me in 3 minutes because I have 5 other connections to get to, and putting in these extra manual steps for someone on our distance campus is probably going to end in potential failure. So we were trying to minimize that as much as possible. So thinking about, okay, we have PCs that are managed by us at School of Pharmacy. We have PCs that are managed by technology services. How can we get a common denominator? Zoom was the most common denominator, obviously, but then we were figuring out a way that I could, with the help of Dave over at MSS, help create a bunch of generic accounts, one for each of our classrooms or conference rooms. We were having a lot of connections, and then deep froze those account settings. So every time it comes up, you'll have dual monitors. If you want to start an instant meeting, it'll start with your personal meeting ID, so it's predictable. And then you'll also have a similar experience. It'll already be logged in there for you. But that was not an option on centrally managed computers. So I then had to think about, okay, I have probably less than like 2 weeks and everyone's on vacation and I really need to get this done, but it was feeling like a little out of my control, because in a way it kind of was. There's I'm anxious and I'm feeling like, I don't know, I'm really going to have to ask for something here to get this accomplished. So we kind of bring this to a number of groups in technology services at VCU, which again kind of illustrates the complexity. So there's MSS, there's classroom computing, security, just to name a few of them, and work with individuals from all of those groups to kind of think about what are the implications of me executing this process. And for me, I'm looking at a very granular level. I'm trying to support my faculty and my students and the staff on our distant campuses. And this looks like it'll work in a way that's automated enough. Maybe it's not perfect, but this is the best thing that we have. So then we had to kind of think about, okay, there were questions brought to us of, okay, right now we're not a VCU Health affiliate. In some ways we're affiliated, but we're not under the VCU Health umbrella, but we are under the HIPAA domain. So the HIPAA domain does kind of govern health information, patient information, to protect patients. So for example, in the School of Medicine, when you're discussing rounds, it's very likely you discuss patient information. However, in the School of Pharmacy, it's a little bit different. We don't actually discuss real patient cases. If we do have a lecture, they're discussing kind of de-identified examples. So we thought, okay, maybe if we can get removed from the HIPAA domain in this instance for our classrooms, we can make this work. So the reason why we had to get removed from the HIPAA domain was we can't save credentials on individual computers. Back to my generic accounts. This is confusing. I'm sorry. I understand it as I live it. So thinking about security, thinking about Zoom's BAA as well as HIPAA, it was also related to saving credentials in our individual computers, being able to identify who was initiating video conferences. There wasn't a significant risk. We had to check with Dave and see, is this something that's violating our agreement with Zoom? And then also talking with Houston's group, Houston and Elena, working with, okay, if we can get this approved, if we can get out of the HIPAA domain, if we can save generic credentials onto computers, then we also have to deep freeze them into computers. So we also need assistance from Houston and Elena. And at this point, it's getting pretty close to the wire. Sunday, classes started on Monday. Everyone was stressed. I was stressed the most, I think, probably. But luckily, we were able to, once we kind of brought this conversation up to other groups of technology services who were able to better inform me of these larger hierarchical, these are decisions that we have to make as conform by other standards, we could make it work. I don't know.
That's cool.
That's cool.
I don't know what that is. So you're trying.
So for us, it's a learning experience. It was a great learning experience for me, though it was admittedly scary and frustrating, and it felt very much like, why would anyone be beholden to me as the really recent new hire that works at the School of Pharmacy with their classroom technology and is, becoming this person that keeps on talking and asking for things. So it felt very much like, I don't know what to do. But as part of this process, I learned a lot more about how we at School of Pharmacy, School of Dentistry, School of Medicine, all of our different schools can kind of work in tandem with technology services and technology services expertise on this meta level where we work at the microcosm of what our customers are asking for, what will and won't work in the more niche environment of a distance education program at VCU, School of Pharmacy, and our 3 other sites. So in thinking about that, that really gave me some perspective as to strengthening our decentralized environment and what advantages our decentralized environment has, maybe even over the environment that I experienced at JMU. Because at the help desk, while I was talking to a lot of individual users at different schools, I wasn't very connected to them. And I didn't really understand their needs the way I do now at the School of Pharmacy, and how I can then kind of feed that back through technology services and figure out how can this work and how can it maybe be scalable if we're all working in the HIPAA domain on our side of the campus. What things can we do?
So voila. Yes. So we talked about, I think after we now onboarded Katie after 8 months and indoctrinated her into this environment, I think really educating the team on what the evaluation of a system or a process actually looks like. So, how I see it is if, say, TS or somebody has an idea and they want to put a system in place, could be a CMS, an LMS, could be something. Someone reviews that. Someone has an idea and a business objective. They look at it, they evaluate it. Then what happens, it may get adopted, let's say Blackboard, it gets adopted, hopefully everyone takes and adopts it at school level. I know in some instances like School of Medicine that is not the case because it didn't meet their business needs. So what happens typically, especially on our campus, we look to see if that adopted process or system will actually work. If it doesn't work, then what we do is we evaluate it. If yes, it meets our needs, we adopt. If not, then we have to reach back out to say someone at TS or who's ever in charge of that project to say, hey, we have additional requirements. Can these be added into the scope of work for this system? If yes, great. We evaluate it. We typically work with other schools on campus to make sure that's the case. If not, we have to then pivot, right? We have our own business needs. We have to kind of do our own thing. So we will adopt our own system. And if you look back at Dr. Rao's message, it really is eliminating redundancy. And that's not like data redundancy or network redundancies. These are system redundancy and resource redundancies. And in this case, sometimes it's just not possible. We may have our own system because that core system that's coming down at a higher level does not meet our needs. So we looked at this kind of full life cycle. Is this the appropriate way to do it? And I would say at this point, probably yes. I don't think there's a better answer. Sometimes the need of that product or that system doesn't have our need. So what we have done, and again, being here for 20 years, I saw what it looked like 15, 20 years ago. I think our model is getting more mature as we speak. I think it's improving all the time. The relationships are improving every year. And I think that's what's great about VCU. I mean, I think the common goal is not can, pharmacy do something or dentistry or medicine or nursing or business or engineering. It's really, if we do something, it impacts or influences people's perception of VCU as a whole. So to me, it's all about the organization, not at the unit level. So sometimes, we are implementing something, but we still have to keep VCU in mind. So these are some things that we put in place, the IT Governance Committee, and many of you folks are on there. I think that's really helped as far as evaluating new systems and processes. If you look at the LMS committee, the Teaching and Learning Focus Committee, this is a short-term committee that was stood up. If you know about it, I won't say, I guess most people know what's happening there with Blackboard or Canvas. And then you have the Technology Advisory Committee meeting. And I would even say offshoot from that, you have TUG and WUG, no curse is part of law, but I think all of these groups and committees just really make it a better place to work. It's a little bit smaller, we get more connected, and I think the decisions are made as a whole versus like one or two people making that decision, and then everyone has to try to adopt it. So what we're really doing here, again, we're not criticizing the model at all. I think the model is maturing and getting better all the time. I think after talking to Warren about, do you guys want to speak, it was really about just educating and informing and letting people know what the environment and the landscape actually looks like, because it's different for all of us, obviously. So let's go from here. This might be yours. We're talking about organizational culture a little bit.
As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm currently reading a book because I'm in a class about groups and teams. It's Paradoxes of Group Life. And this stuck out to me as a relevant quote for this presentation. It kind of got me thinking about a tendency to forget or ignore the problems created by groups while attending to the problems we hope will be alleviated by them. And I think that speaks a lot to our culture, or what we want our culture to look like at VCU, and how we can kind of work with each other between groups to kind of eliminate these redundancies and open up that communication, so we're able to come up with better solutions based on our own expertise at that macro level and that micro level. So we fundamentally need to understand the environment that we're working within and who we need to go to if we do have a question. Say, I have a question about Zoom, I know I can go to Dave. And then we can have a conversation with everyone in the same room that has relevant interests. So I guess the question that we kind of wanted to pose was more of a, what do you guys think the environment or the culture should look like? What does it look like now? Is that a culture that includes department level at IT and TS and vice versa? And how can we better even onboard employees or welcome new people to our organization with these kinds of things in mind? So we did want to kind of open it up to y'all, and obviously we have ceiling mics, so you guys can, if you guys have any thoughts throughout.
So basically the question is, are we there? What's next? We talked about this maturation process. We're continuing to evolve, but I'm curious, does anyone have any thoughts about the complexity of our environment? And I think what you said is it's probably less complex than other environments you've been in. And Sean, do you have some ideas about this?
Yeah, I might be premature on this, but I spoke with Alex Henson very briefly, basically to get a blessing that I could talk to HR, which I'm going to do in a few weeks, part of ITCC, to talk about onboarding on a larger scale. I've had the fortune to have to hire 5 different people over 3 years, so we spent a lot of time talking about onboarding, and it's a living document with us. Forgot to tell you about this. Let me put that in our document. What I want to do with HR is talk to them about technology, yeah, TS, but also across the other schools. Is there something we can do as people come into an IT job family to teach them about organizational structures, governance structures, culture? Once I talk to them, we'll see how far I can get, but if you've got ideas in that respect, I'd love to hear, or if you want to join me, I'd like to hear that too. I know I didn't answer your question, but I hope my guys will say that it's helped them as far as onboarding, teaching them about the organization, teaching them about Central TS as well as the larger campuses.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Anyone else have any questions or comments about this? Like I said, it's not a tech talk, it's really an organization and kind of just a culture talk. So I know, yeah, go ahead.
So I've had the privilege, I guess you would say, of seeing the role that I currently fill morph over time, from a decentralized position to somewhat of a centralized, but also respecting that and appreciating the need for a decentral kind of structure. My predecessor was hired and trained and maintained through the VCU Police Department, but as the kind of outside person that assisted him in his role, working for technology services, I supported more than just the police department. But as he shifted out of the department, there came an opportunity for us meaning technology services, to place an embedded person there. And fortunately, they agreed with that. So living at the police department gives me the feel and need of the users.
Yeah.
But I also have that direct contact with, former colleagues, current colleagues, that I can pull the knowledge from the centralization, from the systems, the people, the resources, the teams, and the discussions.
So compare that if you weren't in that role and you brought somebody from the outside and they placed them at VCU Police, it'd be a very different experience, right?
Yes.
I think the onboarding and the learning curve could take years, perhaps. I mean, I don't know, maybe a year or two.
So coming from that external role, assisting somebody internally, and now being that internal person, it has definitely matured.
Yeah, definitely.
It's morphed into what it should be more. So.
Yeah, and I think the whole idea of the IT career communities, at first we were like, I mean, I heard about it. I think Rod Downs actually brought it up at a TAC meeting, the Technology Advisory Committee. And I think truly, I think the reception at it was tepid at best. We were kind of like, we're too busy. We got to focus on, pharmacy at the time. And we already have committees that we're working on at the university level. Like, I'm not very interested. And I think when Warren called me, we started talking about this. I said, actually, this is exactly what I'm grappling with down here. I mean, if you want us to explain what it's like on my campus, I can certainly do that, and not in a critical way at all. Like I said, this is more of an information session because I wanted to make sure that we all understood what it's like to be, somewhere else or somewhere different. And I know there's some of you guys in here that have been in different units. I mean, look at Laura Bell, who was a student worker, and you went to pharmacy and then medicine and now Office of Research, which is very different than what it's like to be boots on the ground at like SomTech or FarTech. So you have that experience, and it probably helps you have success in there because you already have cultivated your relationships. And so, I mean, I would imagine some of you guys already have that experience as well. So what else could we do? This is up here for a reason because someone had mentioned a book club. If anybody's interested in helping spin up a book club, what would that look like? Katie and I have talked about it. Maureen and I have talked about it. Bill and I have talked about it. Do we focus on, I don't know, the team development life cycle, right? The stages of a team. Do we focus on organizational culture? Do we focus on technology? Do we focus on leadership? Do we focus on personality types and, introversion versus extroversion, MBTI, strength finding? I mean, there's so much that we could bring into the room because I think once you shrink the unknowns down, then I think we can work a little bit better, which is what we're really trying to do here. So anybody have any suggestions about kind of what's next or where we could go, or just comments about the environment in general? Something that we might have missed or left out?
Brian and Katie, this is Colleen Bishop, and I really appreciate you guys bringing this up. I experienced this. I was in a meeting recently, and there was a new hire there that works in the Cabell Library workshop, and he knew nothing about IT or TS or the structure of it, and I deal with this a lot because people that are trying to steer our faculty in the right direction don't always know where to point them. Should they go to the school? Should they go to somebody like Katie for the classroom stuff? Should they go to, TS in general? And so if you're talking about, something like a book club or something, I think it's a university-wide issue that, onboarding people and making them aware of the organization and the structure in general. I think that would help.
No, I appreciate that, Colleen. Anyone else, remote or on-prem? Any comments?
I think just mirroring what they said about onboarding, I started about 8 months ago in the School of Medicine and technology side, and I just found out recently, just by hearing people chat about TUG, TAC, all this stuff. I'm a supervisor technology. So I had so much other stuff in my mind. I need to get this rolling. I need to learn this aspect. I need to learn my staff. That some of these listservs I can easily, during the onboard process, be like, hey, what is necessary? What would be practical for you to be a part of, or what should you know about? Where I may not know a single person to go to within technology services if I needed support. Where that could be an easy resource, like right out the bat for day one out of your onboarding. I think something simple like that could be a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And the other thing to add on to that is we've gotten feedback at the school level, at least at pharmacy, that first day, that first onboarding experience is really good. But because it is information overload, that you're not going to be doing much with it. So it's like, should we do it a week later? 30 days later, 60 days later. So then it probably resonates a little better. Like, hey, now you do want to get on this particular listserv, it may help you. So that's something that we've been thinking about. We're actually talking about that at School of Dentistry now because we're working with our HR folks. Like, how can we onboard better? I mean, it is tough. I mean, it really is. Go ahead.
So one thing we are doing with IT Career Communities is doing a web page, and we're going to have these type talks listed on it. And so one thing we've been discussing is maybe sending a link to new IT job family members. Hey, here's a way of getting kind of your feet wet with a wide variety of information with you. What goes on security, networking, how the different cultures are. I mean, because the thing is, VCU has an overall culture, but School of Pharmacy has a completely different culture than student affairs.
Right.
Completely different goals and mission. So similar, but different. So our culture is not, we have the broad cultures, but we also have little cultures, and understanding each other's little cultures under that entire big broad umbrella helps us when we communicate or need something or have an idea for something on how to deal with that group in a better manner.
Right.
I think then wandering in completely blind and, you know, as a new employee going, who does this? Who does that?
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment too. Over at research, and Jake, he can attest to this, but I've been through the pain of going into the application and not understanding, you know, the complexities that go along with it. So one thing I did was I created a sort of like an introduction to not only the Office of Research IT group, but an introduction to the university in general. So I would have, you know, what systems we supported, just introducing our groups. But then I'd have a section where, you know, here's some listservs to join. If you have questions about SCCM, here's a great group of technicians that support that and their names and contact information. So I would put that stuff in the packet just to kind of help that new employee, because it is a lot. So, and then we'd even talk about just something. I was glad when Kush did the networking talk. Because Jake was able to take advantage of that and just see the complexities of the VCU network. So a departmental training, you know, just kind of a packet with just what we do, and then a small intro to the university and what they support is something I came up with, and that helped.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And is there a technology services version of that available somewhere?
That's what
That's what we're going to
That's
Yeah, I can tweak what I have too. So when that's finalized, I'd love to add that.
Yeah.
Sort of our department package.
Well, and not to, I think that's great, not to like compliment you too much. I think it's a great move because Jay probably has a better experience onboarding than a lot of folks would get. I mean, I know we met Jake because you brought him over to pharmacy, took him over to different schools on campus. Not every leader or boss is going to be able to do that because they wouldn't even think to do that. So, I mean, I think that's an advantage to walking into a shop with a person that's been here for a while. Someone like you, maybe that's new. If you hire someone, you wouldn't know where to take them if you hired them 3 months after you came in. You know what I mean? So that is definitely a disadvantage there. But having that workbook or a playbook in place that Sean over you're working on, they will be very helpful for us. I mean, I look at dentistry. I mean, I worked there 12 years ago. I didn't get any tour. I just walked in, they started, let's go to work. And I'm like, oh, that's good. That's a good onboarding process. And so let me have a conversation. Can we work on our onboarding process? And I think part of it was just implied. Well, Brian already knows us from 12 years ago. He's been at VCU. Let him just come in and start working. I mean, thank goodness I have a really good team, and they're already, taking me around and explaining stuff to me and catching me up on processes. But that's very helpful. But, the first thing I told our administration, if I wasn't from VCU and this was how the onboarding process, if I knew it was going to be like this and I was external, I think I would have left or not even taken the job. It was just a weird reception. So I think, I think that's part of our job is as technology folks, a lot of times the first contact a new person gets is a technology contact. I mean, we're ordering equipment, we're deploying equipment, we're sitting down with them. So if you've never been trained on how to onboard a new faculty or staff, then, as a technician, I think that you should be. It's very key. Again, at least at our level on a decentralized, centralized model, maybe at the technology services level, when those customers are not right in your office, you're not sitting down with them, then maybe that's not part of your onboarding process, right? But so I don't know. I mean, I think that's where the decentralized, centralized works really well. But then we also have to do a really good job at, the decentralized units of onboarding ourselves and having our own policies. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Sean, go ahead.
See if I can be succinct here. We weren't ready to really talk about this, but the ITCC are developing themes around which these types of presentations will align.
Okay.
For example, organization structure, operations, technical knowledge, not collaboration, but there's a few others. And the great work that Warren has done is putting together ideas and speakers fall under those themes. I'm sitting here thinking we really need some external advising, external to ITCC, in terms of someone like you, Brian, say, could you guys please cover this area? It's important to the culture of what we're doing. I think we're in line with TAC, aren't we? ITCC, they're our sponsor. Do you think we would benefit from an advisory council in terms of developing our curriculum?
That's a great question. I don't know. I would say, yeah, it can't hurt you to have it. Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you can get people working together in a group, when there's a charge, I think it's a real objective. I think it's definitely beneficial. I don't know that we talk about ITCC much at TAC. I know we know about it, and again, Warren's been keeping us abreast, but it hadn't been hitting the agendas. So I think if that was a standing item every month on our agenda, saying, hey, here's what's coming up, reminding people that it's there, I think would be very helpful. Yeah, or even a report. Because right now, a lot of times we ask different subgroups or working groups or committees to do a report. That might be very helpful, kind of outlining your plan and thinking about that. I think it could provide benefit. I don't know if anybody else on TAC has any comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sean. Any other, we're already at the Q&As. any other questions or comments in general? I know we have like 5 minutes.
There's a question
there is?
from Mike Talley
asking,
how can we improve collaboration and relationships with VCU-HSIT?
I don't know, you want to take that or Shane?
Come on, Shane.
I don't know. I'm just kidding. Does anybody have an answer? I think, yeah.
I don't have an answer, but I have an experience of having to deal with the health systems. And my role was purely just to translate for the captain that was coordinating a project at the health systems. He had been stationed down at the health systems for multiple years, had great rapport and relationships with everyone across the MCB campus, and he just needed me to translate what was the vendor saying to him in layman's terms. But it also came across that that captain had unfortunately jumped some hoops, the equivalent of our IT governance process. And initially, when we came in contact with health systems, informed the captain that we had skipped some steps and we need to take a step back, and this isn't happening tomorrow, it's going to take months.
Yeah.
And once we got expectations in line, and after that initial head bump, which was pretty rough at first, but once we explained that I and they had the same agenda, which was how can we make this work to benefit the community, and how can I help you, and kind of get outside that barrier of I'm the desktop applications tech. I don't do anything outside of this, but lending that hand or that communication or the resources that they might need to be able to integrate the system across the campuses. So initially it was rough, but I say try, and if you failed, try again. Because usually most people are working for the common goal, which is to make the overall community a better place, and for patients, students, staff, across the board.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think even you saying that helps create the culture that we want created. I think that's very helpful.
And that's the point of this.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Is to try and
100%.
pull the different groups together. We're not all from TS in here. We're actually a variety of different departments, locations, all that divisions. So coming together and talking about this is how you start that process and how you get further along in bringing together a community of IT people instead of separate pockets.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
I had a question.
Yes.
So you had that Venn diagram where you had health systems, and then you had School of Pharmacy, Medicine in the middle, and the other schools. TAC kind of serves the purpose to do the middle and the other side.
Yes.
Is there a committee that actually bridges all together, especially from an IT point of view, where we could actually achieve more
I know,
collaboration?
I mean, I know that my team has had difficulties, you know, explaining the problems that we've run into and showing them how it would be beneficial to everybody if we solve these. And as far as I know, there's only, you know, one or two people that are really talking to the IT folks on the health side. So I got what you were showing with this Venn diagram, but at the same time, it doesn't. There are some ways that it doesn't reflect reality because we don't have, you know,
There's a big gap in between.
communication pathways.
Absolutely.
On that side.
Absolutely, yeah. We do know that Dr. Rao's in charge of all of that. And then there are people under him, so I don't know how we push it up to the deans. And I think that's happened a little bit, where they could take it up to, I'm not even sure, I guess the school medicine dean is now the interim vice president of the health system. So all the deans on our campus report through that chain of command. The one thing I would say, I agree this is not everyone's reality. I think that's why we're wanting to make this an informative session, because for us, it's absolutely a reality every day. I mean, when you hear that VCU Health is exploring Epic versus Cerner and handling that migration, the impact in this room is probably zero. The impact to us at School of Dentistry is huge, because we run our own EHR, and we're probably going to assess, are we going to partner up with VCU Health to go to Epic and run the dentistry module called Wisdom, and that's a big change for us. So yeah, we are definitely trying to chip away at this. We call it the compounding effect or beaver chip, whatever you want to call it. I think we do need to work on that relationship, and I can say already, Keith Dean's group and Cush and Mike S., they're doing a phenomenal job. I mean, we're meeting with them probably every 2 weeks with VCU Health Networking to actually remove some barriers. So I think it's happening, and it doesn't necessarily have to be done up here.
I do
You know what I
agree.
mean? It's kind of happening from everywhere.
I've seen improvements with networking and with security. In certain
Agreed.
aspects, but there's still other areas. I know we have difficulties with, you know, emails and cards getting printed on time and so on and so forth.
Well, I think it's going back to what you said as well. I mean, you have to set the culture. Somebody has to do it, right? And that can be done from anywhere in this organization. And I think as we do a little bit better job in these little pockets, it ends up turning into the norm. Right now, it's kind of the exception that we have a good relationship with the health system. But I think as networking and information security office, you knock down some barriers and it becomes the norm. So I feel like in the next 10 years, it'd be great. I mean, some of us be retired, good for you out there, left behind, but I mean, I think it's going to be a better place, and it's getting better. So yeah. Any other questions or comments?
One comment.
Oh, go. Thanks, Chris.
I would say this has been a really fascinating presentation. I didn't know what you guys were coming with, so.
We didn't either, we just made it up.
And I think like right now there's probably 30 people in this room and probably another 20 or 30 on Zoom, all thinking about how weird our onboarding is. So, I mean, that'll have a ripple effect for sure. And I just think this was really great. Thank you.
Hey, I appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you have any questions?